The Montgomery College-Smithsonian Faculty Fellowship Program is a unique collaboration between the Paul Peck Humanities Institute and Smithsonian's Office of Educational Technology. This unique professional development opportunity encourages community college faculty to teach with the Smithsonian. In 2022, the program hit a milestone anniversary, celebrating 25 years, 235 faculty fellows, and more than 25,000 student visits to Smithsonian museums. Professor Erika Bucciantini completed her BA in Humanities and Social Sciences at Western Washington University with minors in Latin, Greek, and Classical Studies. She attended the University of Kentucky for a Master of Arts in Classical Studies with additional certification from the Institute of Latin Studies. Professor Bucciantini currently teaches at college preparatory, community college, and four-year university levels in Maryland. She has also taught English as a foreign language at Nagasaki Junior College in Sasebo, Nagasaki Prefecture, Japan. At Montgomery College, she teaches English 101 and 102 and Latin 101 and 102. You may also find her working as the part-time faculty associate for the humanities area and as an ATPA embedded coach or an IERW writing tutor.
My project centers around using museum objects and resources to enliven the study of Latin language, to help students create connections between the ancient world and our modern one, and to remove geographic barriers to the access of knowledge. For friends and family zooming in, the MC Smithsonian collaboration is a unique experience offered to a select few each year. I have cherished my time with my cohort and will continue to include Smithsonian objects in my Latin teaching for years to come. Our 2022 cohort focused on social justice in the time of pandemic. Okay. Social justice and Latin might not always be found in the same sentence frequently, but my goal for this fellowship was to present my students with objects and ideas and to give them the space to make the connections between the ancient world and ours. My inspiration was the Monuments Lab National Monument Audit produced in 2021 in partnership with the Andrew W. Mellon Foundation's Monuments Project, which is a $250 million initiative that facilitates broader expressions of the multiplicity of American stories in our public spaces so that our collective history will be more completely and accurately represented in them. The Monument Lab spent 1 year investigating almost 50,000 historical records in the United States and defines monument as a statement of power and presence in public. In my course, I invited students to employ this definition, not only in viewing ancient monuments, but more modern ones as well. At its heart, Latin 101 is a grammar translation course, so we spend a lot of time learning grammar and translating Latin sentences. But when we aren't doing that, we've been discussing monuments, money, symbols, their meanings, and their interpretations. To allow time for integrating tangible museum resources and important discussions, I flipped my classroom. All of my lectures on grammar content were swapped for lectures on objects, and I put all of my grammar on YouTube with attendance study guides. This was pretty awesome, I'm not gonna lie. In class, we discussed social justice themes and objects, particularly our conversations centered around coins as monuments in miniature, media of memory, the premier items of contact, conquest, and colonization. And we also talk about monuments, circling around the monument audit and reflecting our own history accurately. And in progress was an architecture lecture. I sort of touched on that, but I need to develop that even more in further classes as we go along on neoclassical styles, symbols, presence, and awe. Students created small assignments, interacted in discussion groups, and they also created a capstone for our language courses, which is an independent research project and presentation, which I added some learning lab resources thanks to the Smithsonian. We also did a visit to a museum, the National Museum of American History, and that was super fun. It was a 7-week course this last fall, so the museum visit actually happened after the semester was over, but this semester I'll be able to incorporate it while we're actually in session, so I'm excited to do that as well. To expand access to as many learners as possible, this course was a high flex hybrid adventure. I did everything in person that we did online, everything online we did in person. So students had 2 modalities in which they could interact not only with class, but also with museum objects. In my lectures, I asked students to consider I can't speak today, Roman monuments in the public landscape, i.e. in the context of ancient history, and also their symbols, deification, nationalism, and concepts of imperialism as well. We talked about coins as monuments in miniature, which is a prevailing numismatic theory from Dr. Rowan at the University of Warwick in the UK. We discussed notions of collective sharing, collective values, media of memory, and the creators of community. After that, we turned our attention to American samples. What do these American symbols mean in our public spaces? How can we interpret them? In discussion group, I then asked students to find coins of their own. They found the symbols of a nation, the symbols of an empire, these ubiquitous quotidian and objects that yet mean more than just their monetary worth because of their cultural significance and their function in history. I also did not limit my students just to Smithsonian resources. In the classical studies field, we need to be able to be comfortable with museum resources throughout the world, accessing them digitally and physically if we can, though that tends to be a little bit more expensive. Student reactions to including museum resources in the lectures were overwhelmingly positive. Students loved talking about money as miniature monuments, talking about the symbols, which alluded to these abstract notions that we love to tout in America, and the Romans did as well, of liberty, peace, and authority. The parallels between Romans and Americans were absolutely shining in our class discussions, and students loved how even these daily objects that we touch or maybe don't touch as much anymore were a bit of a direct connection with the ancient world. For another small assignment, we turned our attention to our critical reading skills and looked for these themes in modern news articles about money. Major student themes that came out in student research are profits over people, the tension between the individual and the community, the notion of cashless societies, and does that equate to taking down statues? Who is left out, and how can we keep our humanity in a divided society? Students also talked about cultural ideals that we are portraying with our money and our public symbols, and how these ideals reflect our society. The capstone for language classes is the cultural presentation. This is the rubric. It prioritizes critical analysis, information literacy, technological competency, and integrative learning. Sample cultural presentations for this last term include mythology, cultural research, history, architectural research, and all of these things that they came up with are tied to museum objects or the buildings which house the objects, which we all too often overlooked. This is totally integrative learning enhanced. Notice there's not one single presentation on gladiators or the gods. Topics were specific, relevant, connected to a tangible object, and showed increased attention to analysis and modern relevance. I'd call that one a success. The last set of lectures that we managed to wrap up in our 7 weeks together was on monuments. We talked about Jupiter, Octavian, and Augustus in a row. And these guys show the classical iconography, divine nakedness, symbols of powers, that adlocutio pointing hand, and Hellenistic idealization of rulers as deities. We then took a trip. We took a trip to the National Museum of American History, also available in 3D via the Learning Lab. So students who were in person and able to come down to the Smithsonian were able to do so. Students who were not able to do so could also visit via the Learning Lab and take a look at this George Washington. So we visited the National Museum of American History. It was a cool fall day. A small but quite lively bunch. I took the picture, so I'm not actually in the picture. So 4 of us in total. One student was intending to make us, but we missed that person somewhere in the museum. So the students' reactions to the Smithsonian trip, George Washington's super impressive. The 3D image of the model is really well done, but it really can't compare to 12 tons of half-naked white statue and symbolic gravitas standing literally right there, and you can walk all the way around the guy. Students considered the icons and symbols on the George Washington statue as bridging the worlds and the mythologies, and saw the founding fathers as part of the American mythos, which is an interesting concept. Students enjoyed the awe-inspiring and massive statue as well. And here we are. with the first monument to be removed from the Capitol and ensconced in our public attic, AKA the second floor of the National Museum of American History. We also visited the exhibition right next door, American Democracy, A Great Leap of Faith. And students left 101 seeing everyday Latin everywhere. They are equipped not only to engage with the Latin language, but to think about our symbols and our statements of power and presence in our public spaces and their ancient precursors, and to engage in meaningful research, critical thinking, and thoughtful analysis of museum objects. Lingua Latina non morto est. It's not dead, it's just hidden. You gotta look for it. So just a quick thanks to Sharon Park, Associate Director of the Architectural History and Historic Preservation Division, for her generosity of her time and research with me as well. Dixie, actum est.